Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham, and as I said a couple of minutes ago, I'm going to be presenting Get Accepted to Harvard Business School this evening. I want to thank you all very, very much for coming on this nice summer evening, and I want to tell you a little bit about me before we start. Now, the truth be told, when I was a little girl, I didn't dream of becoming an admissions consultant. And even as I graduated college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do professionally. However, as a college senior, I worked as a writing tutor at UCLA, and I loved the work. Years later, when my kids were young and my husband and I realized we needed me to make more money, I decided to return to being an editor and writing tutor. I put in an ad at the UCLA Bruin and started getting business. To my surprise, at the time, I was frequently asked to edit grad school personal statements and application essays. Frankly, they were a whole lot more fun than the research papers I was also editing, and I sensed that the demand was there for a business focused on graduate admissions. Using my own MBA and a lot of sweat equity, I decided in 1994 to focus on admissions editing and advising, and Accepted was born. A couple of years later, in 1996, as an experiment, it's hard to believe, but yes, in 1996, putting up a website was an experiment. I put up www.accepted.com, and business exploded. It grew quickly beyond what I could provide myself, and I began to add consultants and services. I found and find the work of helping young adults clarify their ideas as they pursue their dreams incredibly rewarding, and have been at it for 25 years now. Accepted has helped thousands gain acceptance to elite graduate programs around the world, including, of course, Harvard Business School. So I'm looking forward to sharing my 25 years of admissions experience with you this evening. Before we begin, I wanted to mention a few items that will help you get the most out of this webinar and thereby also help you get accepted to Harvard Business School. Here they go. 1, if you've not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. And my suggestion is that you actually print it out and take notes with it. It's linked to in your control panel, and you can find it in the handouts section. Number 2, I'm going to ask a few questions during the presentation and ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon, 2 icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. And we're going to use the question window for both your questions and your answers. So if you have a question in the course of my presentation, please don't hesitate to post it in the question window. And if I ask you a question, especially an open-ended question, please post your response in the question window. Number 4, you can win. We're going to have a contest towards the end of the webinar based solely on content presented during the webinar. Stay tuned, and you can win a free consultation with me. When you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. We value your feedback, and it really helps us improve both this webinar and future webinars. Now, I'd like to test your hand-raising skill. Please raise your hand if you are here because business school, and specifically Harvard Business School, will whisk you on your way to the career of your dreams. Raise your hand if you are here because you want to go to Harvard Business School. Great. Wonderful. All of you are here for the right reason, and you figured out how to raise your hand. Fantastic. Good. Now, last housekeeping, last item that will definitely help you get accepted to Harvard Business School, and really the applicant's favorite. Accepted has a special for today's webinar registrants, and I'm going to tell you about it right now so you won't be anxiously waiting to find out. Starting today, and you folks are getting first notice about it, Accepted is having a 10% off any non-rush MBA service. Accepted.com/MBA package is one way you can access it. Coupon code is Get Started, and the offer ends June 20th. The rest of the world will have access tomorrow. You have access starting today. You know about it now. You can contact us. And again, if you decide to work with one of our consultants, you can save 10%. And that 10% can amount to hundreds of dollars depending upon how much of our services you buy. But you can buy a little or a lot, and again, save that 10% through June 20th. Now, I always like to get to know my guests during a webinar. So I'd like you to tell me city and state where you're located. If you're in the United States, city and state. If you're outside the United States, city and country. We'll take a few responses here. Post that in the question window, please. Dallas, Texas. You're in state. In which state? Houston, Texas, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Killeen, Texas. Okay, welcome. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Anybody in California today? Or this evening, I should say. Well, it's still the work day here. I'm not surprised that we're getting mostly East Coasters here. I wish. Okay. Providence, Rhode Island. Wonderful. Okay. Next question. I'm going to have a little poll. How many of you plan to apply to Harvard? Definitely, probably, maybe, or doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise. Those are the options. Oh, let me launch it. Sorry, I forgot that little detail. It's kind of important. The options again are definitely, probably, maybe, doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise. Okay, with 80% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. 88% are in the definite category, and 13% are in the maybe. Well, you folks are a lot more definite than this morning's group. That's all I can say. In this morning groups, we actually had a surprising number. 12% were in the doubt it category. All right, next question for you. Actually, let me share the results so you can see them. There you go. You see, 88% are definitely, 13% are maybe. And let's go to the next poll. Where are you planning to apply? Definitely planning to apply round 1, planning to apply this cycle round 2, hoping to matriculate in 2021 or later. In other words, you're planning to apply in a later cycle, or really not sure. Okay, again, the options. Definitely applying round 1, planning to apply this cycle round 2, hoping to matriculate in 2021 or later, and not sure, with 83% having voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. And they are 70% applying round 1, 10% applying round 2, 20% hoping to matriculate in 2021 or later, and not sure. Again, this is a much more definite crowd than this morning. It's actually kind of interesting to note the contrast. All right, I'm going to hide the poll, and I think I have one more. How many of you are in financial services, consulting, technology, or other? Again, the options are financial services, consulting, technology, or other. Okay, and we have 92% voting. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. So 27% are in financial services, 9% are in consulting, 9% are in tech, and 55% are in other. So that one actually pretty much mirrors this morning's. We had slightly more in tech this morning. Also a more international crowd, many more from India, I suspect. That probably is playing a role in these numbers. All right, let's move on. Now, I'd like you to raise your hand if you'd like to know the guaranteed route to Harvard Business School. Raise your hand if you'd like to know the guaranteed route to Harvard Business School. Well, most of you, and that's what I expected, actually. Definitely, I see some people are writing it in. Yeah, I'd like to provide you with a guaranteed route, but you know what? It just doesn't exist, and I'll actually touch on why in a little bit. I can't guarantee that there's an automatic acceptance at the end of the rainbow if you follow the steps I'm going to outline, but I am absolutely convinced after 25 years in this business that the steps I'm going to outline will enhance your chances of acceptance. So the plan for the next 45 minutes or so is to go through Accepted's 4-part framework for successful MBA application and apply it to Harvard Business School's application. You can use this strategy framework on any top MBA program and for 2+2. And then we're also going to focus, though, in terms of tactics, on Harvard Business School's 2018-19 application. The 2019-21 isn't out yet, or certainly wasn't as of this morning. And so anytime you'll see a screenshot, it's referencing last year's application. The one element of the application that I know is the same as last year is the essay question. because Harvard has released that information. Now, I'm also, in the course of the webinar, going to issue some warnings and caveats, and I'm going to start right here. You're not going to submit a compelling application if you think it's a matter of makeup or merely spin or waving a magic wand. You need to submit a substantive application, and in my book, that means competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. In other words, you need to demonstrate fit. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Harvard Business School. Now, before I tell you how I think you should show that you're going to that you belong at Harvard Business School, I'd like to hear from you. How do you think you should show that you belong at Harvard Business School? In the question window, please. How do you intend to show that you belong? Why should Harvard Business School admit you? In the question window, please. Strong recommendations and essays that show your true self. Okay, that's part of it for sure. Anybody else? Good undergraduate grades coupled with relevant work experience and extracurriculars. Good. Through essays describing how HBS can help me attain my goals. I'm not actually sure that Harvard is necessarily interested in that. I think that's part of it, but we'll get into that a little bit more. It could be. Harvard Business School's mission, what values I could bring to the school and what the school could provide me. Okay, good. Demonstrated leadership, definitely important at Harvard, no question. Very good. All right. On some level, my question is a little unfair. I'm going to spend the next 40 minutes telling you what I think you should do, and you have a little box to fill in. I think you've all hit on something that could be part of your, should be part of your application, but none of you have really hit on all 4 parts of the framework. And that's what I want to go through, because I want, when you walk out of here or you're looking at your application before submitting it, I want you to think, do I have these 4 parts? If you do, you're ready to submit, and if they're well done. If you don't, you might want to wait. Okay, the first of the 4-part framework, of Accepted's 4-part framework, is demonstrate you can do the work and excel. In Harvard Business School's words, they want to see analytical aptitude and appetite. Now, the easiest way is to show that through your undergraduate transcripts and test score. It's not all about transcripts and test scores, but that's surely a great place to start. And ideally, you want to be at or above Harvard's averages for accepted students for both grades and test scores. If not, how can you convince Harvard Business School to accept you if you have, for example, below average grades? Well, first of all, realize that averages are what they are because people are accepted with below average grades. Roughly half are accepted actually with below average grades. So don't look at the average and see it as a threshold that you must be above. Also, don't see it as a ceiling. It is an average. And the further away you are below the average, and if both your grades and test scores are below average, especially if they're significantly below, the less likely it is that you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work up to Harvard standards. If your grades are a little bit below and your test score is good and you want to apply to Harvard and you want to show Harvard that you really are capable of more than perhaps your undergraduate record shows, take business classes now and earn A's in them. If you have a problematic GPA or a lack of quant classes, you may also want to consider certificates like the CFA if it's relevant to your career goals. If your quant skills are weak, if you're the proverbial poet, but your grades are good, consider something like MBAmath.com or quant courses at your local college. That could be statistics for business, calculus if you have and remember the prerequisites, economics 1, accounting 1. MOOCs are also massive open online courses are also possible, especially if grades are less of an issue and it's more about just beefing up those quant skills. HBS Online is also an excellent option, especially if you take it for a grade and you do well in it. High test scores can mitigate or may mitigate a low GPA. Here are the average scores both for GMAT and GRE at HBS, as well as the breakdown and the quant range. So you can see, again, If the median quant is 49, they are clearly accepting people with lower quant scores. If for the GMAT, if the median verbal score on the GRE is 165, again, they are accepting perfect scores as well as significantly lower scores. But you have to make a really compelling case for Harvard Business School to overlook a low score. And if you're considerably below on either verbal or quant, I would at least consider a retake. As much as possible, you want to have your ducks lined up. If you're not sure whether to retake or not, and not everybody with a low score should, please see that GMAT score. We have a short video as well as a full webinar giving guidelines on exactly who should retake their test score. Both the focus is at GMAT, but the principles apply to the GRE as well. So analytical aptitude and appetite is generally evident in the transcript and test scores. And realize that your transcript also, it's not just about the grades, it's also about the courses you took rather. Did you stretch yourself? Were you narrowly focused on one area, or were you curious about areas outside of your specific specialty? If you did focus on one area, did you excel in that area? Did you take upper division classes? Did you really challenge yourself? And also realize that communication skills are critical for HBS, which says on its website that it is a highly verbal environment. And of course, it uses the case-based method. And Harvard states very clearly, quote, "We look for individuals who enjoy lively discussion and debate." And that can come through via essays, resume, recommendations, transcripts, extracurriculars, and of course, your interview if you're invited to interview. Somehow, some way in your application, you need to show that you can do the work effectively at Harvard Business School and not struggle with either basic math or communications. So that's part one of the framework. Part two, you need to have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Harvard Business School and how you intend to use it. So in the question window, please, why do you think it's important to have this clear, realistic idea of why you want an MBA from Harvard? Why is it important to have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from Harvard and how you intend to use it? In the question window, please. Anybody? Nobody wants to hazard a guess. Okay, I'll tell you why it's important. It's important because they ask you. Now we see. Okay, James just responded. All right, very good. That's another reason, James. I didn't mention it. So you can jump right into the recruiting season prepared. Don't waste time. Excellent. That is definitely part of the reason. The most immediate reason it's important, though, is because Harvard's going to ask you about it on the application. So Harvard is in its first two boxes basically asking for the classic goal definition of a post-MBA goal, which is function plus industry. In addition, Harvard asks for your career aspirations. Briefly tell us more about your career aspirations, and it gives you a whopping 500 characters for that. 500 characters is right around 100 words. It's not a lot of space. And what do they want to see there? Well, they want to see that you have career direction. They don't want to see a laminated life plan. And that's in this whole area. In terms of the box itself, it's a very open-ended question, and it's allowing you, though, by using the word aspiration, to dream a little bit. They already know your immediate post-MBA goal. What do you see down the road a bit? You could discuss greater career aspirations and goals, or why this goal motivates you. How did you decide you want to pursue this end? But mostly, this is a future-focused question about your longer-term career aspirations and why they appeal to you. Think about what you really want Harvard Business School to know about your career aspirations. There are going to be different boxes for job history and community service. You want this box to flow, to make sense given what you've done in the past and what's in other parts of the application. In a nutshell, any admissions reader should be able to connect the dots between what you've been, where you've been, what you've done, and see how Harvard Business School can connect your past to your future. They know their program. They know their career strengths. They know their extracurricular opportunities. They know they have a phenomenal program. And you just need you may in your essay also provide more information about your goal, but it should be clear. Now, for some of you, this is going to be really easy. For example, if you're moving up in consulting, you can write about the impact you intend to have as you move up. If the connection between your past and your desired future via the MBA isn't as obvious, make it clear. You don't have to abandon or hide a non-traditional career path or a career change. Just make a logical case for it. For example, if you're a biomedical engineer who worked for a biotech company in medical devices, and now you want an MBA so that you can move into general management or perhaps launch a startup, you're making a change from a technical role to a general management role. But it all makes sense. And Harvard Business School is a general management school. That's what it prepares people to do. So yes, James, you're right. You should have this goal so that you can be prepared to jump into recruiting when you arrive on campus. So you can be prepared to take advantage of all the opportunities that Harvard provides in the most purposeful and goal-oriented way. That's why you need this goal. Now, Harvard is, so that's number 2. Number 1, show that you can do the work and excel. Number 2, have a goal that requires a Harvard Business School MBA and show that you know how you intend to use it. And 3, show that you share Harvard's values and have the character it seeks, that you meet its criteria. Now, Harvard is extraordinarily clear about what it's looking for. It's looking for 3 things. 1, a habit of leadership. 2, analytical aptitude and appetite, which we touched on, we'll touch on again, and engaged community citizenship. Now, some of you mentioned leadership when I asked how you're going to show that you belong at Harvard, and that was a really good answer. And indeed, I think it's an absolutely critical, vital part of any application to Harvard Business School. I visited Harvard Business School several years ago and met with one of the professors there. And in the course of our, I don't know, half-hour conversation, he asked me, what do you see as the common thread among your clients who've been accepted to Harvard? I didn't expect the question, frankly. And I thought for a minute and I said, leadership and impact. And he smiled and the conversation moved on. And then I was already getting ready to leave, and I realized I should ask him the same question. And I asked him, what do you see as the common thread in your classroom? And he said, I see tremendous diversity in my classroom, but if there is a common thread, it's leadership and impact. And that's why I smiled when you gave your answer. So I think this is absolutely vital for a Harvard Business School application. Now, I might add, it's not just vital for Harvard Business School. When I interviewed Keith Bevins, who's the global head of consultant recruiting for Bain & Company, he also wanted to see similar things. He wanted to see impact and achievement as opposed to mere responsibility descriptions on a resume. That's what got him excited about the resume. It's very close, and it's not surprising that Bain is a feeder to Harvard and Harvard is a feeder to Bain. Now, analytical aptitude and appetite is the second quality that Harvard Business School is looking for. They want you to be a person who is willing to change. You're a critical thinker, you have a desire to learn and analyze. In Harvard's words, our case and field-based methods of learning depend upon the active participation of prepared students who can assess, analyze, and act upon complex information with an often ambiguous context. So, what does this imply for you as an applicant? Yes, you have to have good grades and test scores. We already discussed that. But you also have to be prepared to show times when you learned as a result of mistakes, as a result of successes, through critical analysis of a particular situation or data, and that you learned in the past. Because Harvard promises a transformative experience. Part of having a transformative experience is having people who are willing to be transformed. You need to show that you can, that you're in a growth mode. The third criterion is engaged community citizenship. Now, community citizenship is a great place for you to show the impact that had so impressed the professor and me for a variety of reasons. It's frequently easier to make a difference off the job than on the job when you're relatively junior in your profession or in your career. Ideally, you want to be able to show impact both on and off the job for Harvard Business School, but you don't want to focus exclusively on professional contributions. Realize that Harvard Business School is a residential community. It's a residential program. It views itself as a community. And again, it wants people who are going to contribute, who are going to make a difference. Now, the whole issue of community service is kind of an interesting one. Let's analyze that term for a minute. Community. Community is most commonly thought of as your geographic neighborhood. I live in a certain section of Los Angeles. That's my community. In reality, and that certainly can be your community, but in reality, we're all parts of multiple communities. Okay, community can be, a geographic community. It can be an ethnic community, a religious, political. It can be affinity community, just a matter of an interest that you have in common with a particular group of people, sports, the arts. It can be alumni organizations, that's also a community, or professional associations. So that's community. And what about service? Service is not the same as just being a nice person. Helping somebody out is not making a commitment to serve. And that commitment and assumption of responsibility to a group is the difference between being a nice person and actually doing service. It's not even the same as volunteering once or twice. Again, the differentiating quality, in my opinion, is commitment and responsibility. Now, I have a bunch of organizations on the screen. I mean, I could have put thousands of organizations if I wanted to. You don't have to join an organization. You can also start or launch a new initiative if you see a particular need. And here I'm going to also issue one of my caveats. We've gone through the Harvard's 3 criteria. Don't just mouth them back or spit them back to Harvard. There's a tremendous difference between mouthing platitudes and spitting back websites. There's a tremendous difference between spitting back websites and showing that you share the values. The former, the keyword stuffing or spitting back websites, that's just trying to wave a magic wand or put lipstick on a pig. And you know what? It still isn't pretty. It's just like the makeup slide I showed you earlier. But what is substance? Examples in your essays, bullet points in your resumes, your responses to the job history questions and activity history questions, the specifics that you bring to bear, those are the substance. And we're going to get back to that in a little bit. Letters of recommendation, you can coach your letters of recommendation about Harvard's 3 criteria and encourage them to include examples of when you demonstrated or met those criteria. Obviously, the responses to your interview questions must also demonstrate these qualities. Now, I'd like you to write down for yourselves ways in which you would demonstrate, let's just deal with a habit of leadership. Now, also a word about a habit. A habit is not a one-trick pony. A habit is something that you done repeatedly. So if you're going to show leadership, it can't just be one event. You want to go back in time. I would certainly go back to college. I'm not sure if I'd want to go back to high school. I would kind of try and stay away from that unless you're applying for 2+2. So you don't have to spit back the phrases at all. You have to show you meet these criteria, you'll contribute at Harvard, and that you are going to take advantage of Harvard's 6 differentiators. I don't think you have to relate to all 6 rather, but you do want to relate to at least 3. Now, what does that mean when I say relate to? Well, global intelligence. Perhaps you worked abroad, perhaps you see yourself working abroad, or you want to work in a global company, corporation. Learning and practice, that's absolutely vital for Harvard. You have the case-based method, which gives you practice as a decision maker, and you also have experiential learning opportunities. So do you like to learn? Do you like projects? Do you like working on teams? That will show that you are interested in learning and practice. Entrepreneurship and innovation. Again, you're not all going to have to go into entrepreneurship. That's fine. Innovativeness is probably something they would like to see, whether you're going to entrepreneurship or into the corporate world. but that's something that Harvard definitely values. And we had a wonderful podcast with the founders of LeverEdge, who are in between their first and second years at Harvard Business School, and just launched their startup as they were starting at Harvard Business School. If you are interested in entrepreneurship, I strongly encourage you to listen to that podcast. Rachel, can you post the URL for that podcast after the webinar is over? So you don't, I suggest again that you really study the criteria pages and the Harvard 6 differentiators before you start working on your application, and certainly before you go for the interview. Another warning, Harvard has really unparalleled brand in higher ed in the United States, and probably close to unparalleled brand in the world. If you focus on rankings or that brand, you're going to obscure the fit aspect of admissions and contribute to you focusing on the wrong things. You won't be showing fit, you won't be providing substance, you're going to just be waving Harvard's brand around. Well, again, Harvard wants to make sure that you're going to add to its brand. It knows its brand is going to rub off on you. So they're not interested in hearing what a great brand they are or how well ranked they are. What are you going to do for Harvard? And if you focus on the brand or you focus on the ranking, you will blend in with all the other people making the exact same mistake. You want to show that you have distinctive experience and perspective that you can contribute to the Harvard Business School community. Harvard has lots of applicants and can be choosy. With the 10.4% acceptance rate for the class that entered in 2018, it basically rejected almost roughly 9 out of every 10 applicants. That is really long odds. So, and that stat in particular leads to my last strategic point. Again, the framework. Show you can do the work in Excel, have a goal that requires an MBA from Harvard, and 3, show that you meet Harvard's criteria and share its values. 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions and field experiences, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Now, how can you do that? Well, realize that there's a fundamental principle underlying admissions. Past behavior predicts future behavior. So if you can reveal a habit of contribution and impact through your essay, your resume, your activity history, interviews, letters of recommendation, the whole application, then you are showing the kind of behavior that would tell Harvard you're going to be a contributor at Harvard Business School too. Again, Harvard Business School wants givers, not takers. So at this point in the question window, I'd like you to tell me, where have you made a difference? We've been talking about impact, we've been talking about contribution. When have you made a difference to your team, organization, employer, club, community, however you define it? When have you made a difference? And I'll provide you with some feedback. While you're writing and thinking, I'm going to tell you some that I thought of. Captain your college baseball team to its first championship in 10 years. Now we're getting some participation. Okay, created a junior Asian professionals network board in the larger affinity network to give analysts and associates more exposure. Good. I'd like to know a little bit more how they benefited from that and how many people participated in the affinity network. But you're on the right track. Started an intern mentorship program for my department. Excellent, Bradley. How many people participated in it? What were the benefits of this program for them? Did they, I don't know if you can measure this or relate it, did more of them stay with your company? Did they advance more quickly? What was the impact of that mentorship program? And again, how many people participated in it? Anybody else want to share? Okay, here we go. Intern for pro bono work for a microfinance institution in a foreign country. Excellent. Again, I'd like to know, obviously, I'm sure you would say the country if you were actually doing this for your application, but I'd like to know a little bit more about the time you devoted to it, how many loans were made, what was the impact of the microfinance, of the micro loans on the small businesses. Were they able to get equipment that they otherwise couldn't? That kind of stuff. was somebody able to send their child to higher education as a result of that, or secondary education, whatever it would be. Okay. And let's go, we've been talking about community service. I want to touch on work experience for a while. Now, in terms of competitive work experience, there are two aspects to it. There's quantitative and there's qualitative. The quantitative is fairly easy to describe. It's 3 to 6 years of work experience. I would say 2 to 8 years. That's 3 to 6 is kind of the sweet spot. 2 to 8 years is still competitive. You get outside it, especially on the lower end, I think you have a problem in terms of being what Harvard is looking for. Now, in terms of qualitative, what makes for qualitatively competitive work experience? Above average progression on the job, above average responsibility and trusted in you, above average impact, as we've been discussing. So do you have the work experience quantitatively and qualitatively that will allow you to contribute in class? The answer needs to be yes. And now, so we've been talking about the need to show that you can contribute something distinctively. I also want to show you, or do a little experiment here, that I think will illustrate better than anything I can say the importance. Okay, so James is also providing some commanded an attack aviation company in combat that increased flight hours over the previous rotation by 22%, resulting in contributing decisively to the end of the physical ISIS caliphate in Syria. Yeah, that would definitely qualify as making a difference, James. Thank you for your service, and that was an excellent example. But getting back to what I was talking about a minute ago, do you present yourself distinctively so that you will naturally stand out? Okay, and here I'm going to again post some polls, and let's see how you respond to them. You can respond, you can choose more than one. How many of you worked in finance or consulting, traveled outside your home country, or volunteered? And this would be in college or since. Okay. How many of you work at some point in time since college or now in finance or consulting, traveled outside your home country, or volunteered? Okay, we're at 79% having voted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. There we go. So 58% of you worked in finance or consulting, and 92% have traveled outside your home country, and 92% have volunteered. Okay, next poll. How many of you during or since college have worked for a hedge fund focused on emerging markets, consulted for a pharmaceutical company exploring new markets, or served as a counselor for a wheelchair-bound, ventilator-dependent teen? Okay, well, we're only getting 14% voting, and apparently one person said that two people have worked for a hedge fund. Okay, let's give you a few more minutes. We're getting some better numbers here. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here are the results. Very different results, right? Nothing here. Okay, thanks. Very different results. In the question window, please, what's the difference between the two sets of questions? What's the difference? More specific. The second set of questions were more specific. Exactly, Jaylee. Second set demonstrates impact? Not really impact, they're just much more specific. Second set is much more specific. And what happens when I ask specific questions? Second set makes you insecure? I'm sorry, Jessica, that wasn't my intention. Provide details. Anybody else? Okay. Differentiate yourself. Exactly, Jaylee. You're on it. Okay. You stand out if it applies to you. Right. What I'm trying to say here is if you describe what you're doing or what you've done in very general terms, you're going to blend in with those people who've done very similar things, and you're going to blend into the overwhelming majority of applicants who are describing themselves in very general terms. I volunteered for 3 years. Oh, wait a minute. Where did you volunteer? What did you do? What did you accomplish? In other words, what I'm trying to show here and illustrate, and I think Jaylee got it, if you write about what you're doing in specific terms, you will automatically distinguish yourself and stand out from other applicants. If you write in general terms, you're going to sound the same, and you don't want to be the same. You want to show that you're going to have something distinctive to contribute. Now, why is distinctive contribution important? Not just because of the low acceptance rate, though that's certainly possible. Well, before I go on to that, I just want to just give you some more examples at this point. Are you going to describe yourself as an engineer or a transportation engineer? There are lots of engineers applying, many fewer transportation or engineers applying, or civil engineers, or you just the more specific you can be succinctly, the better off you are. Are you a consultant or a healthcare consultant? Did you volunteer, or did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community, however you define your community? Yes, you're going to stand out automatically if you write about what you've done and what you think in specific terms. Now, why is distinctive contribution important? Admissions is a two-step process. The first step is determining the qualified. And at a school like Harvard, there are always too many qualified applicants. So the admissions committee selects from among the qualified to create a diverse class and rich learning environment. And this second step injects a subjective element to the admission selection process and is the reason there is no 100% formula or recipe for getting accepted to Harvard Business School. Harvard Business School admissions office wants to create the most interesting, diverse class possible. In its words, a dynamic environment that mirrors the breadth and depth of our world economy. And that's a pretty broad mandate, if you ask me. But the implication from the selection part of the process is that HBS has no reason to admit an applicant who lacks something distinctive to contribute. The other thing I hope I illustrated with a little exercise we did a minute ago is that you don't have to climb Mount Everest, swim the English Channel, cross some crazy desert, run Ironman marathons to distinguish yourself. Doesn't hurt if you did. But if you didn't do that, a lot of times it can just be how you describe what you did do. By describing it in specific terms, you are going to be distinguishing yourself. Now, let's review the 4 strategic steps you need to think about before and while putting your application together. Number 1, demonstrate you can do the work in Excel. 2, reveal a goal that requires an HBS MBA. 3, show you share the values and meet Harvard Business School's criteria. 4, establish your ability to contribute a distinctive element to your class. Now let's look at the elements of the HBS application. The first one is a resume, 1 to 2 pages, and then there's a job and activity history. And what you see on your screen now is the job history window for Harvard Business School. As it does throughout the process, Harvard is looking for evidence of leadership and achievement. And indeed, they ask key accomplishments. And you must show impact and contribution throughout these boxes. The employment section will ask you for your most recent 3 jobs. In your resume and employment sections, as I said earlier, focus on achievements and contributions. In other words, impact, not mere responsibility descriptions. Even when Harvard Business School asks for roles and responsibilities, as it does in the top box, use those 250 characters to provide specifics that distinguish and amplify your role. For example, you could write that you led a team, or you could write that you led a cross-functional team of 5 and you were the youngest team member or youngest member. Quantify impact whenever possible. You increase sales by X%, reduce costs by Y%, achieved a faster time to market than has been done by anybody in your company. Whatever it is, Try and quantify your impact whenever possible, and show how you went beyond your responsibilities to achieve more. In the activity window, Harvard Business School asks you to list up to 3 extracurricular activities in order of importance to you. Again, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, I'm basing the comments about the application itself, not the essay, on last year's application, because this year's application isn't out yet. I'm not anticipating great changes to it. I think the principles that I'm providing will still hold with whatever they ask. Please tell us about the things you do while not at work or in class, including other activities like community service here as well. And this is, again, quoting Harvard, we use this section to get a sense of the leadership roles and activities that attract you. So in choosing your 3 most important activities, I certainly would not choose more than one that is a solitary one. I would still try and focus on those that are most important to you, as well as those that allow you to highlight your leadership and community service. But they are really trying to get to know you here. So if you're a solitary butterfly collector and that's really something that you love, that's okay. But then the other 2 better be better. I would certainly want to see leadership in them. Now the question, as I said, is confirmed for this year. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? I think this is an excellent, excellent question. What do you really want Harvard Business School to know that isn't reflected in your application? What are you truly proud of? Think of Harvard's 3 criteria, and as you're formulating your answer and deciding what you want them to know, you could choose to write about context for events listed in your resume or activity list, and that context obviously has to be important. It could be a challenge you face in achieving what you have achieved. It could be a pivotal moment. It could be what you intend to do in the future if that's really driving you. I believe there was somebody earlier who suggested that. And how you came to want to pursue this goal. It could be a pivotal moment in your life. It should be something that only you can write. It should be something that you would want to share with the Harvard Business School Admissions Committee. Now, I'd like you to jot down for yourself a few ideas. There's a place in your worksheet for this about what you would like to write about. Take a minute. It's okay. And then we'll continue. All right. What it shouldn't be a copy and paste of your response to Stanford's What Matters to You Most and Why. It should not reflect the kitchen sink approach. In other words, where you throw everything in that you want them to know. Choose the most critical and impressive elements of your life to share with them, and also your thought process. Why is it important? Your resume, it should not be your resume in prose or some superficial summary, grand finale, if you will, of information found elsewhere in your application. That will not work. And although there is no word limit, be concise. Harvard and most busy people value concision. Don't write more than necessary. Harvard also provides you with an additional information section. The instructions were, please share additional information here if you need to clarify any information provided in other sections of your application. This is not meant to be used as an additional essay. Please limit your additional information to the space in this section, and it's a 500 character limit, or roughly 100 words. So they don't want more. They give you license in the essay, right? They really no word limit there, but here, back to 500 characters. So clearly you have to be concise. This is a place for you to provide context for something that needs context. It could be a drop in grades. It could be a gap in employment. It could be, what else could it be? Usually those are the most common ones, okay? Let's move on to the Harvard Business School interview. If you are lucky enough to be invited to Harvard Business School for your interview, be prepared for a probing interview with someone who has closely reviewed your application. They go through that application with a fine-tooth comb before the interview. They may ask you to connect the dots between different points in your life. They may ask you to explain a decision or pivot point in your life. And you also should expect some unexpected questions and be able to respond thoughtfully to an unexpected question. Now, I had an amazing interview with Ida Valentine. I do like my interviews, you can probably tell. Harvard Business School class of 2021. She's starting at Harvard in the summer, and this summer. And she is extremely thoughtful in terms of why she wants to go to Harvard, very purposeful. She's also gave great insight into the Harvard Business School interview. So after the webinar is over, I suggest you go and look at it. And yes, we will be sharing the URLs that I'm passing out and I'm recommending. What is the purpose of the Harvard Business School interview? It's to evaluate your fitness for learning in a case-based method program. Assess your fit with the Harvard Business School community. So you, in preparing for it, should prepare to tie your past to Harvard Business School and your future. Again, connect those dots. To prepare for the Harvard Business School interview, know your HBS application inside and out. They will. Prepare stories that show you as a decision maker and leader. And by stories, I don't mean made-up stories. I mean anecdotes about past experience. And prepare examples and anecdotes that show you in a community or group setting and as a giver, as a person who has made a difference. Now, Harvard also has its interview reflection, and that is Harvard's attempt to give you, the applicant, the last word in the application process. So I recommend that when you leave the Harvard Business School interview, you just sit down and you think. It's a beautiful campus. If it's a nice day, find a quiet corner. Just sit down and think about the interview and make some notes. Where do you think you answered well? What do you wish you had been asked? What do you feel you need to clarify? I go into more detail on these points in the blog post listed here. And again, we're going to send out these URLs. It's for these things. What do you think you answered well? What do you wish you had been asked? What do you feel you need to clarify that the interview reflections is for? Also, this is an email. It's to demonstrate how you can communicate when you don't have the time to spend weeks crafting. It shouldn't be, 1,000 words. It should be much more succinct. Think of a business email. All right, let's go back to your goal in submitting an application to Harvard Business School, and that is to show that you belong at Harvard. And we're going to have the contest now. The first two to answer and get it right gets a free 15-minute consultation with me. The question is, what are Harvard's 3 criteria for admissions? In one block, please. Don't hit enter until you get it all out. Okay? What are Harvard's 3 criteria for admissions? Okay, Munkuli got it. And James got it. Yep, okay. It's the habit of leadership. Okay, so, right, James and Munkuli got it. Wonderful. All right, good. Now, let's review the 4 ways to show you belong at Harvard Business School. 1, present the academic credentials that show you can do the work and excel, that you have that analytical aptitude and appetite. Have a goal that requires a Harvard MBA. Show that you meet Harvard's criteria and share its values. And 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. And an almost final word of advice. The Q&A is going to start in a couple of minutes, and I see that Karen Ash is already here for it. The admissions committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. They really are. Don't try to craft, fake, or fool. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4-part framework that will make Harvard want you. Now, before we move on, I have a question for you. What was the most valuable piece of information or advice for you in today's presentation? In the question window, please. What was the most valuable piece of information or advice for you in today's presentation? Preparation for the interview. Okay, great. how to think about the HBS essay question. Great, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Reminding us to connect the dots throughout the application. Good. Showing you can contribute to Harvard and not vice versa is important. Yeah, that's a good one. The 6 differentiators tied everything together and how to complete the application. Wonderful. Good, I'm glad. That's actually from Harvard's website. It's on their site also. It's not something I made up. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, we're going to get the Q&A in just a second. Realize that a successful Harvard Business School application requires, and I really hope I convince you of this, requires all 4 elements of this 4-part framework. Not just 1, not just 3, not just 2, because to get accepted, you need to show that you both belong at Harvard, that's parts 1 through 3, and stand out in the applicant pool. That's part 4. This framework gives you the what of a successful application. What you need now, however, is the how applied to your individual circumstances. To be accepted, you need to get accepted and work with one of our outstanding consultants. We want to guide you in showing that you both belong at Harvard or whatever MBA program you're aiming for and stand out in the applicant pool. We want to guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses, an application that accomplishes everything we've discussed here today. Now, here's what you get at Accepted. You can access expertise and experience, you can reduce your stress, save time, optimize your school choices and applications, and mitigate weaknesses. That's what you get when you take advantage of Accepted's team of outstanding consultants. Now, some may say Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not a cheap service because of the quality of our staff. However, there are very expensive risks associated with not using Accepted, and that you don't find those in an add to cart button. Reapplication can easily cost a few $1,000s if you include travel expenses, perhaps retaking a test score, etc., and even the application fees alone. You'd have a larger cost is additional year of pre-MBA earnings that can cost in the 5 figures. 1 additional year of, well, I hope you're not in a situation where you don't like your job. And then there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network. And that could cost you also 5 or 6 figures lifetime. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, that they'll work with us a second time around. We're happy to work with them, but they would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do Accepted's clients say? And I'm going to take excerpts from this. The first one is on the left. I did find out just over a week ago that I was admitted to HBS. I definitely would not have been successful without your, in this case, Esmeralda Cardinal's help. Or on the right, and yesterday I got the good news, and it was from Harvard. I'm absolutely thrilled. Amidst the euphoria, I want to take a moment to thank Accepted, Jennifer in particular, for all the help and in ways that went beyond admissions consulting. Or here, this one. It's a wonderful feeling to have been accepted by Harvard, a school that until now I had only dreamed of attending, but sincerely I could not have done it without the help of Cindy. She made sense of all my confused ideas and inspired me to write well, but the best part was her editing. It was almost magical. And the last one, although I just got admitted to Wharton, I already decided that I will be joining Harvard Business School, also accepted to Stanford GSB. This is like a dream come true. I already recommended my friends to work with you when they plan to apply. This fellow, by the way, had a GMAT several significantly below average. Different people, different challenges, and different fears. Same result at Harvard Business School. I can't say that all our clients are accepted to Harvard. No, it's not true. But we'd sure like to help you use the same magic of expert, insightful, individual advising that we use with these clients to help you get accepted to Harvard Business School. Now, imagine yourself in their shoes, happily sharing the news with friends and family, attending an admit weekend in Boston, planning to start at Harvard Business School in the fall, and pursue your dream career with Harvard forever on your resume and the HBS Alumni Network as your network. On the screen, you'll see the steps that those clients took and what I suggest you do. It's now June. There's time before Harvard's round 1 deadline to work with us. Contact us ASAP, and we'd be happy to help you from scratch or review and edit your essays. Our goal is to guide you so that you present all 4 parts of this critical framework and show that you both belong at Harvard and are a standout in the applicant pool. take these steps to work with an experienced, outstanding, accepted MBA admissions consultant. In addition, as I mentioned at the beginning, through June 20th, you can take advantage of the special that for the rest of the world starts tomorrow, and that is 10% off any non-rush MBA service, whether you want to buy a little or a lot. You can save potentially even over $1,000. And if you're interested in multiple hours or packages, again, hundreds or even $1,000. So now I think I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Karen Ash. Let me unmute her, who will be joining me for the Q&A. Prior to joining Accepted, Dr. Ash served as the Director of Career Services for Cornell University, Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations, and the Johnson School of Management. In those roles, she frequently evaluated applications. She knows what admissions committees and employers want. And yes, Dr. Ash has had clients accepted to Harvard Business School. Karen, welcome to the webinar. And applicants, we're happy to take your questions. Let's see what we have here. Let's give them a second to post some questions. Unless I answered all of them in the course of the webinar and you don't have any, but if you have some questions, we're happy to take them. I'll give you a second here. How are you doing this week?
You were very thorough, Linda.
Well, maybe there's no questions. I don't know. Let's give them a minute. All right, here we go. Okay. We are getting some really good questions. All right, let's start with this question. If you have a learning disability, what is your recommendation on how to inform the school of this? You have an answer to that one? I actually don't know the answer to that one.
Well, I think it depends on what the learning disability is and
if it's going to affect.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
you obviously got through college, and so is it something that will affect your academic success in Harvard? And is it something your references would write about? I mean, it's something you have to decide, do you need to talk about it at all? And depending on what it is, there are ways to talk about it. I've had clients with disabilities, and some chose to talk about it and some did not. And, you know, schools are very used to having students accepted who have disabilities, and they have all kinds of services to work with students. So I don't see it as a negative, but it depends on what it is. It's hard to answer in the generalizing like this.
Right. Okay. Bradley asks, any specific advice for reapplication? You want to start with that one?
I think you need to really analyze your former application if you were able to get any feedback from the school as to why or how you could improve your application. Schools don't generally like to give feedback, but if they know you're reapplying and you ask how you can strengthen the application, they may be willing to tell you that. So if you do know where your application was weakest, then you need to show how you've improved since then. What steps have you taken to strengthen it? And we do have a service at Accepted too. You can have a consultant review your whole application and help you decide what were the weaknesses and how you might strengthen it.
Right. I think the key for reapplicant is exactly what Karen said. Evaluate where you went wrong, or get somebody else to evaluate it if you can't get the school to help you out. Most schools don't provide feedback, and Harvard is included in that. And then you have to address what were the weaknesses. If you had academic weaknesses, then you need to beef up your academics. If your goal was fuzzy, then you need to clarify your goal and how you're going to use that Harvard education. If you did not show proper fit, maybe your presentation wasn't great, then you need to improve the presentation. If you didn't have enough work experience, presumably you've worked another year, maybe you can not only show that you have more work experience, but that the work experience is qualitatively superior to what you had last time. Maybe you have more international exposure this time around, more leadership, more impact, all the things that we've been talking about today. The key thing, though, for a reapplicant, and we have worked with successful reapplicants to Harvard, is to show that improvement. If you do the same thing you did last year, you're going to have the same result. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, Karen asks, does Harvard bucket its applicants by industry? If so, how would the financial services bucket look, particularly if you are in a more middle office or support type role at a large firm?
Well, every school tries to, as Linda had mentioned in her presentation, they create a class and they want a really diverse class. So every year the bucket of, those coming from finance or those wanting to go into finance, that percentage is going to vary. It'll vary every year. I think in terms of being in the middle, I think you need to show what achievements you were able to have given the job you performed, and how did you stand out in that, and how would you compare yourself to your peers? What did you do? How did you add value to that position? Also, your extracurricular may be something you want to emphasize.
Right, exactly. There's actually I was on the Harvard Business School site, not preparing for this, I think preparing for the Lever Edge podcast. And this came up actually in that podcast interview also, that many people admitted to Harvard Business School feel like, how did I get here? I mean, I didn't done anything that special. And if you go to the Harvard Business School site, there's actually a little video along that line. Basically, imposter syndrome is widespread among the Harvard Business School class, and it came out in the Leverage podcast interview. Rachel, can you post the link to the Leverage podcast interview? But to address your question more head on, I think that every applicant has to convince the school that they are a member of a group of one. They're not just financial services. They're not just of a particular ethnicity. They're not just male, not just female, not just, whatever label you want to tack onto them. They are individuals. And that's your job. So Karen's right, talking about how you achieved above average results in your role is going to help you stand out and create that group of one that you're a part of. Talking about your extracurricular activities and how you made a difference there. That's going to help individuate you, differentiate you, and create that group of one that could tell Harvard that you're going to be a valuable addition to their class.
And more importantly, where do you want to go in the future?
Yeah.
And how is Harvard going to help you get there?
Okay. And I think this might be the last question from James. How long is too long for the essay? I understand it depends on the narrative, but if it's over 1,000 words, for example, even if interesting, is that too long?
We talked about this on the earlier podcast.
Right.
I think it depends on what it is you have to say, but I would say most essays average between 1,000 or maybe even 700, 800, and 1,300 words.
Mm-hmm.
It can be as long as 1,500 words, or even some have been 2,000. But it depends on the content. Is every word necessary? You don't want to be verbose. You do want to tell your story. You do want it to be compelling, but you don't need to overtalk. So it's going to vary for each of you.
Right. I think the key and the reason that Harvard gives you the latitude is it's a chance for you to show some judgment, and they're evaluating that judgment also. And the quality is frankly more important to them than the quantity. If it's really good and if everything is important for them to know in the essay, they're not going to mind it if it's a bit over 1,000. But if it's repetitive, superficial, which judging by your earlier comments, I doubt if it will be, James, then you're going to be fine. I would not be comfortable with it going over 1,500. It would really have to be exceptional in my view if it was going to go over
I
that.
agree.
Okay. All right. Now I want to thank Karen for sharing her expertise with us today. I want to thank you applicants for coming, for your questions, your time, and your attention. And now I have a final thought and story. The thought: there is a paradox inherent to acceptance at a top business school like Harvard Business School. You have to demonstrate that you will fit in and that you'll stand out. And by fitting in, I mean that you belong at the target school, in this case Harvard, in terms of your goals, your academics, your work experience, and values. That you're going to be a valuable member of the HBS community. And for HBS, this means showing that you have the habit of leadership, the analytical aptitude and appetite, and engaged community citizenship that Harvard Business School is looking for and finds, I might add, in its acceptance students. In addition, you have to stand out. You need to stand out in a highly qualified, intensely competitive, and impressive applicant pool. You need to show that you're able to contribute distinctively, add a special something to the school's community, and make the admissions committee members proud they voted to accept you. Now, let me give you an example of how one of our outstanding consultants worked with a client to successfully navigate this paradox that's at the heart of admissions, of the admissions process. She was actually supposed to be here this evening, but last minute couldn't make it. I've been talking about how important distinguishing yourself is. Accepted consultant Natalie Greenblatt Epstein puts it front and center when working with her clients to HBS, and I think Karen indicated also that she puts it pretty much front and center. Natalie tries to unearth what she likes to call the gem or the secret sauce in her client's profile. So for example, with Sally, a pseudonym, that gem or secret sauce was an unusual hobby that complements impressive but more typical work experience. And that, I think, relates to Curran's question a minute ago also. Again, good work experience, but much more typical. Her hobby, however, also showed initiative, critical thinking, a sense of adventure, and leadership. And here were the results in Sally's words. I have great news. I got accepted by 4 out of 5 schools, and one school even made me a great scholarship offer. Most likely, I will move to Boston, HBS, in August. I couldn't be happier. Sally followed the steps on the screen. With acceptance help, Sally found her secret sauce and unearthed and polished the gem inside of her. She earned her MBA, or is earning her MBA, at Harvard Business School. We'd love to help you discover, present, and polish the gem that's inside of you so that you can join her and become a Harvard Business School student and then alum. Thanks again, everybody. Good luck with your applications.